an interesting shift in how humans consume information and interpret current events, particularly in Western audiences, has occurred coinciding with the rise of the 24-hour news cycle and more recently, social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Reddit, and so on. Before the creation of these institutions, access to information regarding news and politics was very limited, both by the physical constraints of the actual media formats that were used in previous decades to inform the public, as well as the number of options of sources available to choose from, and time allocated on each of these source channels dedicated specifically to covering current events. Because of this, standards were imposed upon news sources to make sure that the information being relayed to the public was done in an as accurate and honest way as possible. In the United States, this was ensured by the 1949 FCC Fairness Doctrine that mandated that media news channels discuss controversial issues in good faith, the quality of which was evaluated by the FCC. This fairness was to be carried out using different methods, but the ultimate goal of the Fairness Doctrine was to minimize political bias in the news by those who were presenting the news, expose audiences consuming these news sources to diverse, differing opinions, and make sure that the public was adequately informed on both sides of any given political debate. The Fairness Doctrine was eliminated as a mandatory regulation by the FCC in 1987, and since then, as stated previously, a subtle but profound shift has occurred in the way our modern society consumes current events and politics. No longer are news organizations and media platforms primarily tasking themselves with accurate information reporting. Instead, these news sources have redesigned themselves as entertainment entities meant to grab your attention and keep you watching as long as possible. Without regulations in place, the companies that controlled these media sources realized that it's more profitable to maximize ratings as much as possible by tailoring content on certain channels to appeal to specific subgroups and audiences. By doing so, they retain a loyal viewership that consistently tunes into their network to consume quote unquote the news, or at least the news presented in the way they agree with. Over time, different news networks have filled different audience niches that vary by their viewpoints, with some being more extreme than others. This economic model is more reliable and profitable than how TV news has traditionally operated. News anchors typically only provide a fair, or sometimes even disingenuously positive representation of their side of the debate, while giving unfair representation of the other side of the argument, and trying to make those who may disagree or view things differently as uninformed, immoral bigots. By doing so, these news anchors alienate some viewers, but again are able to retain a loyal viewing base by validating and reaffirming the positions of those who consistently view their channel. What's worse, these news organizations often overblow certain events or use inflammatory, dramatic, and emotional language under the facade of trying to keep you accurately informed, but in reality to cause a powerful reaction within the viewer and keep them watching and the ratings up. This comes in the form of overhyping or even inventing public scandals, hyper-focusing attention on tragedies, constantly covering controversial topics. The list of tactics goes on and on. Meanwhile, social media sites like Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, Tumblr, etc. are a mess of their own because they also deteriorate the quality of public discussion by creating echo chambers. These echo chambers are where false narratives, misinformation, and outright hostile emotions thrive and breed, and when they inevitably seep beyond their chambers and clash with other corners of the internet, the results are usually uncivil, immature, and unproductive fights. These discussions usually aren't trying to evaluate the validity of a given argument or the effectiveness of a given policy. Rather, most of these online internet discussions are either just preaching to a digital choir of people who already agree with you, or, in the case of disagreement, just repeating what you heard somewhere else, or reposting a political meme to strangers, and then viciously name-calling and dehumanizing the person or people who disagree with you. So how does all of this relate to a culture war, you may ask? Well, it's because all of the political talk show hosts, the enraged news anchors, the Twitter activists, the Facebook meme reposters, the 4chan trolls, the Tumblr keyboard warriors, the Reddit pseudo-intellectuals, YouTube channels making fun of liberals or conservatives, they're not really a part of what they think they are. They're not really talking and discussing politics, at least not beyond a surface level. They're not really making an impact beyond just getting outraged. These are all participants and players in a culture war, producing and consuming fast food junk politics that is streamlined and dumbed down in a way to make the producer or consumer feel like they're important and relevant in the discussion, when really all they are is just another way for some corporation or organization to make money. On one hand, this is a serious problem because these culture wars are factors in the ever increasing political polarization, causing the quality of democracies in the West to slowly decline. In the United States, our institutions have become gridlocked and partisan, our politicians preoccupied with advancing their agenda in favor of working together to find compromise, and any and all discussion that takes place is being dealt in terms of absolutism, with an us versus them mentality. There is no longer any nuance in our public political discourse. On the other hand, this culture war in the broader scope of things doesn't matter, because the people participating in it rarely take any action. Voter turnout is always laughably low among the American voting populace. In the 2016 presidential election, for example, if did not vote was an option, it would have won in an overwhelming majority of states, besides half a handful. For as vocal as younger generations are about the injustices in our world, whether they be right leaning or left leaning, young people generally have low voter turnout as well. And then, people my age turn around and are surprised when few politicians over the age of 40 seem to legitimately care about issues such as underemployment, the housing crisis, the environmental crisis, and student loan debt. Furthermore, people rarely remember media scandals after about a period of 6 to 8 months, with some exceptions. As of the time I'm recording this, it is June of 2019. Can anyone watching this, without looking it up, honestly tell me what cultural issue was being overly analyzed and beaten to death a year ago, in June of 2018? What about 2 years ago, in June of 2017? In June of 2016, there was Brexit, yes, but I don't remember much else. How about 5 years ago, in 2014? If you can remember that far back, good for you. But for most people, I'd argue they can't, because what you find is most of this utter nonsense doesn't matter. People get worked up, outraged, have online debates with someone where the best arguments are straw men, insults, and half facts. You turn on your favorite news channel and watch the pundits talk over one another at some glowing, shiny table for a few days, and then everyone forgets about whatever it is we're all angry about the minute the next scandal comes along. I could go on forever, but I want to wrap things up and discuss why I'm making this video. Now, I should clarify there really isn't anything wrong per se with being heavily involved in invested political issues, even if it is over the internet. For example, if you're transgender and you're trying to advocate for transgender rights, then it is understandable you're heavily involved in online communities discussing advancing your rights. Same for any community or issue that one may be personally involved in. But I've watched countless right wing social justice warrior compilation videos. I've spent a lot of time in liberal leaning subreddits like r/politics. I don't know how many hours I've wasted debating people over the internet whose opinions I've never managed to change anyway. I've spent a lot of time being frustrated and resentful and obsessed over these non issues that I thought were crucially important, only to find they didn't really matter at all, and I ended up forgetting about them. I've switched from one side of the aisle to the other, and then back again, depending on my mood, but it all gave me the same result. It never contributed beyond my narcissistic belief that my opinion without action actually meant something. Immersing myself in this kind of content never fulfilled me, or informed me, or solved any issue for myself or for society as a whole. All it did was satiate my need for information consumption, my need to feel like I was a part of the cultural forces of influence at large in the world. But I wasn't. I never went out to march for anything. I never tried to go to public forums or to hear guest speakers. I rarely ever voted or participated in the political process in any meaningful way. I never moved beyond the narrow, limited scope of my internet bubble of cultural friction and debate. And as I gradually realized what was happening, as I slowly distanced myself from and cut down on my media consumption, when I finally did return for brief periods at a time to see if I was missing anything, I started coming to the conclusion that none of what I was watching ever meant anything. I started seeing the trends of how people use flashy, outrageous titles and clickbait to get your attention, eerie music in the background to unease you, quotes and video clips of the other side showing just how truly sinister and evil they were, or, alternatively, trying to make them look stupid. All of it, all of it was meaningless. In reality, we live in the best time in human history to be alive, and all the data shows it. Every day, the world becomes just a little bit brighter. Yes, we have problems. Yes, war is not over. Systematic and social injustices occur daily. Environmental disaster waits for us on the horizon. But at the same time, technology gets better, as does healthcare and human rights. The number of people living in absolute poverty decreases every year, as do child mortality rates. More and more people are seeing their wealth increase across the globe, and peace settle in many countries that were once unstable. I'm not trying to say the world is perfect or at peace, but humanity is certainly in the best shape it's ever been, and all the trends point for this to continue. So, am I saying stop watching the news, stop using social media? No, not at all. Both have their place in our society, even with their flaws. What I offer is caution. Caution of falling down the media culture war rabbit hole that takes over your intellectual personality and locks you into an unwavering, limited perspective. Take every ideology, every position, every person who uses media in any way to spread their perspectives, including myself, with a grain of salt. It's one thing to be active within the democratic process. In fact, too few people seem to actually be involved in democracy these days. Fighting, truly fighting for what you believe in, advocating for what you think is just and good, analyzing, critiquing, and improving policy, researching trends and data to inform yourself, questioning your sources, then questioning the sources of your sources, and evaluating the extent of their bias and what role their agenda plays in developing their opinions, going out and making your voice heard, and respectively listening to those who disagree with you, and constantly keeping in check your own biases and agenda, all of this will make you a well-informed citizen with the actual ability to influence how our society is shaped and change our world for the better. Not sitting on your computer, watching endless meme videos and making fun of melodramatic social justice advocates, nor sharing profoundly woke tweets in all caps with claps in between, complaining about something as benign as butter being actually problematic and racist. Just like with actual junk food, make sure the information you consume is nutritious, quality, and part of a well-rounded media diet to help maintain the health of your political and intellectual development. Thank you all for listening. This is my first video on the channel, so if you liked what you heard, make sure to click the big old red subscribe button down in the bottom corner and give this video a thumbs up. I'm planning on releasing content every week sharing my thoughts and insight on the modern trends we all but too often tend to oversimplify, as well as other topics I might find fascinating. I haven't really decided what direction I want to take the channel yet, but I think it will be interesting nonetheless. Please feel free to comment below what you agreed with and disagreed with in this video, and what you think about social media and the news. I always enjoy hearing different perspectives. They help expand my knowledge and insight on different topics. With that said, I hope to see you all here next week. Cheers!